Hello YouTube, my name is Janice and this is my very first YouTube video. I have always been a true crime content consumer, but I have never taken the dive into content creation myself. I decided to finally do it because I actually personally knew someone that is a convicted murderer now, and I'm comfortable talking about it. It's been years, he's in prison for life. Also want to bring attention to that case because there's still a missing woman that was most recently associated with him. A few things first. Believe I'm supposed to say this is for entertainment purposes only. I will say the convicted murderer that I am referencing has been convicted and is in prison. So I'm not going to say this is alleged because he's been convicted. Another thing, this is my first video. I am feeling awkward, I'm feeling nervous, I'm dressed comfortably so that maybe I am less awkward, but I'm probably going to play with my hair. I'm probably going to say and so a lot. I don't have a professional setup, but I don't think those are the most important things. The story is. So with all that said, let's get into it. In 1995, Dana Satterfield was living in South Carolina. She owned her own beauty shop. She was married to a man named Mike Satterfield, and they had two beautiful children. On July 31st, 1995, Dana was working at her beauty shop, and a door-to-door saleswoman came by. She had a great conversation with Dana. She actually sold her some cleaning supplies, and then she went along to sell to other customers. Once the sun went down, she came back to the beauty shop parking lot to wait on her ride. She saw that the lights were still on and she thought, wow, Dana's working really late. She thought about going inside to hang out with Dana while she waited on her ride, but something in her gut said, don't do that. So then she starts hearing scuffling and sees the light go out, and then she hears a loud bang and sees a man tumble out of the beauty shop window. The saleswoman books it to the liquor store next door and calls the police to say, hey, I think I've just witnessed the end of a robbery. Y'all need to get out here. So the police come, and unfortunately, it was not a robbery at all. Actually, all of the money that was in Dana's purse, that was in the register, it was left there. So clearly money was not the motive. They did find Dana unalived, and I won't go too much into the details because I want this video to not get banned, but it was brutal, I will say that. Unfortunately, the only evidence they found initially was a fingerprint on the water heater that Dana was left tied to, and they also got a report from someone that said, the building I work at, I saw a blue and white Ford Bronco parked there. It was after hours. Nobody should have been parked there. And that building was close to the beauty shop. So he wasn't sure if that had anything to do with it, but it was something. They also had the eyewitness that saw the man tumble out of the window, and she said he was about 5'9". With any unaliving case, the spouse is usually the first suspect. In this case, Mike and Dana were separated and headed towards divorce, but it was amicable. Also, Mike was a very large man. There is no way that was the man that was seen coming out of the window because Mike wouldn't have fit out that window. I am hoping I will figure out how to put pictures in with this video, and if so, you will be seeing Mike here, and you will know he didn't come out of that window. So they start, also the fingerprint. The fingerprint was Mike Satterfield's. He had installed the water heater for Dana since they were still so amicable. So unfortunately that fingerprint wasn't a lead. That left them only with the blue and white Ford Bronco. They initially thought that that would be a great tip. That has to be a pretty unique vehicle, right? Well, in 1995 in South Carolina, in our small town, that seemed to be a pretty regular vehicle, so it led to a lot of questioning, but it didn't go anywhere. So unfortunately, the case goes cold for 10 years. 10 years later, Dana's daughter is now grown, and she takes her car to the auto shop, thinking it's just another day. One of the mechanics sees Dana's daughter and asks one of his coworkers, "Hey, who is that? She looks really familiar." They told the mechanic, "Oh, that's Dana Satterfield's daughter. She looks just like her, doesn't she?" That makes the mechanic flood with memories, flood with guilt, and he remembers what he knows about 10 years ago and that crime. So, what did the mechanic know? On July 31st, 1995, earlier in the day, he and his friend Jonathan Vick rode home together from school. Jonathan mentioned that he was going to get his hair cut that night, and the mechanic, who wasn't a mechanic then, but the friend asked him, "Where are you going to get your hair cut that late at night?" And Jonathan said, "Oh, I'm going to go see Dana. And while I'm there, I'm going to ask her on a date because she is so hot." The friend kind of laughed at him. Jonathan was a 17-year-old high school student. Dana was a 27-year-old beauty shop owner, wife, mother, like the math wasn't mathing, as the kids say. Well, this upset Jonathan pretty badly, and he was known to be an arrogant guy, so he just told his friend, "Watch, she'll go on a date with me. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow." Well, the next day, the friend hears about the unaliving of Dana, and he remembers that Jonathan said he was going there with the motive of taking her on a date or getting her to agree to a date. But the friend thinks, there's no way. My 17-year-old friend did not do that. Well, then Jonathan called him and said, "Hey, I heard about Dana's unaliving. If you tell anyone about what I told you in the car yesterday, I will unalive you." So while the friend didn't want to believe that Jonathan was a murderer, he also didn't really want to risk his own life. So he did make a call to the police in 1995 from a payphone, and he wanted to stay anonymous. He told them, "You need to look into Jonathan Vick." He said he was going to the beauty shop that night. He had a crush on Dana, and he drives a blue and white Ford Bronco. So the police tried to get a probable cause affidavit signed by a judge to get DNA from Jonathan Vick. The judge says that an anonymous report and someone driving a similar vehicle was not enough for a probable cause affidavit. So that it had gone cold. But when the mechanic sees Dana's daughter 10 years later in 2005, he's like, "Okay, I have to do something." He calls police again with the same story. "Jonathan Vick, he told me he was going to the beauty shop. He drove a blue and white Ford Bronco." The police said, if you're going to stay anonymous, we still can't use that information to get a probable cause affidavit. So the mechanic says, "All right, enough is enough. I'll give you my name." And he does. They get a probable cause affidavit signed. They go and get Jonathan Vick's DNA, and it is a 9,000,000 to 1 match. All these years, it was Jonathan Vick. He drove the car. The friend gave the report, but because the probable cause affidavit wasn't signed for 10 years, he was on the loose, and a missing woman will come into play in a moment. It also came out that back in 95, because of the anonymous report and because of the blue and white Ford Bronco, the police did question Jonathan Vick and his mother, since Jonathan Vick was a minor. They questioned them 6 times about Jonathan's whereabouts on the night of the unaliving. They questioned them 6 times about the Ford Bronco, but they just denied everything. Jonathan Vick and his mother wound up making a white poster board sign that they taped on the back of the Bronco that said, "This is not the Bronco you're looking for. Don't waste your quarter on the payphone. We've been cleared." So, long story short, after they matched the DNA, Jonathan Vick is charged, tried in a court of law, and found guilty, and he is sentenced to life in prison. From what I understand, he has since gotten in trouble in prison. One of the times involved threatening the life of a prison official, so that's great. So in that 10-year time span, Jonathan did not stay out of trouble. He was fired from about 15 jobs due to not getting along with coworkers or not getting along with supervisors. He did 2 years in the Marines, and that didn't last. In 2002, he met a woman named Heather Sellars. Heather was working at 2 Waffle Houses, and at one shift at one of those Waffle Houses, she met Jonathan Vick. They hit it off. They started dating. They quickly moved in together and got engaged. When Heather's father found out about this, he said, please do not be around this guy. The father knew because, again, we're from a small town, so people talk. He told her, Jonathan Vick was questioned in that cold case in our town. Please do not date him. But like a lot of young people, Heather Sellars said, whatever, Dad, you're annoying. I'm going to date who I'm going to date. It was reportedly an abusive relationship with Jonathan abusing Heather. They would break up, make up, break up, make up. Anytime they were broken up, they did still maintain communication. Well, on September 24th, 2002, Heather was dropped off for her shift at one of the Waffle Houses she worked at. She was dropped off there by a relative because she had stayed with that relative the night prior. But Jonathan Vick picked her up from work and they went to 2 bars together. Heather Sellars was never seen again and is still a missing person now, 21 years later. Jonathan Vick was the last person seen. Jonathan Vick is now a convicted killer. The day after Heather went missing, Jonathan Vick went to the gas station that Heather's grandmother worked at, and he asked, hey, has anybody seen Heather? The grandmother said no. Jonathan said, oh, don't worry, I'll find her. But they never heard from Jonathan again. They never saw Jonathan again. They never saw Heather again. Heather's vehicle wound up being found in the bottom of a river. Her mother passed in this time frame that she's been missing, and she wasn't at the funeral. So the family has all but accepted that she has been unalived. They highly suspect Jonathan Vick had something to do with it. But as of 2023, she is still a missing person. Her remains have not been found if she was in fact unalive. So her poor family doesn't have closure. If she isn't here anymore, they haven't been able to properly accept that and give her a proper burial. It's just devastating. And I wish, after Jonathan Vick has now been in jail since around 2006, if he had anything to do with that, I hope sooner than later he will have some awakening or some epiphany where he grows empathy for the family of Heather Sellars and lets them know something. The only other person that for a while was thought to be connected with Jonathan Vick was a woman named, oh my gosh, Michelle Whitaker. Michelle Whitaker worked at the same Waffle House that Heather Sellars did. And Michelle Whitaker went missing and stayed missing for 6 years, but she wound up being found, and she had just chosen to leave for a while. Since she is a found person and is not in danger, I'm not going to give details on her background. I'm just going to say, if you search Jonathan Vick, there's still some web pages that tend to attribute 2 missing women to him potentially, but it is only Heather Sellars now. Okay, how I knew Jonathan Vick personally. When I was around 15 years old, I was hanging out with an older crowd. A lot of times, not a great crowd. Sometimes, if any of y'all are watching this, you were probably part of the great crowd. Don't worry. But I was a lost, traumatized girl, and yeah. I had an older friend, and she was 19 years old. We hung out a lot. She started dating a man named Jonathan Vick. This was around 2002, 2003. So this was right around the time Heather Sellars went missing. The 3 of us, me, my friend, and her new boyfriend, Jonathan Vick, hung out a lot. We went to amusement parks together. We went to Jonathan Vick's house together where he cooked us meals. He started to get a bit creepy. I'm not going to go too much into that, but I got enough of a creepy vibe that I distanced myself. And imagine my thankfulness for that when I saw just a couple of years later that he had been arrested for a cold case unaliving in our town. Just goes to show you, somebody might seem great. This guy seemed great. He seemed normal. But yeah, he had already brutally unalived someone. And it just, be careful who you're around. I keep my circle about this small now. You see that pinpoint? That's my circle. And not even just because of Jonathan Vick, but that didn't help. That didn't help me want to have like a huge group of friends. So end this by saying, rest in peace to Dana Satterfield. Heather Sellars, I wish and I hope that her case winds up being like Michelle Whitaker and she is found. But if that is not the case, I hope Jonathan Vick has a come to Jesus moment, a epiphany, like I said, and gives that family some closure. And lastly, just be careful who you're around. Be careful who your children are around. If you have teenage children that tend to hang out with an older group, be careful. It could be harmless, but just make sure you know who you and your children are around. Thank you for watching this. I know I played with my hands a lot. I know I'm not a professional video maker, but I felt I had a pretty unique perspective, and this hasn't been a highly covered case. It was covered on Unsolved Mysteries, and I recently found and connected to the man that played Jonathan Vick in Unsolved Mysteries, so that was a small world, super cool moment. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. If you hated this video, you don't need to tell me, just scroll on. If you hated this video, I doubt you're still watching 17 minutes in, but thank you. Until next time, be safe and keep your loved ones safe.